It doesn't matter what they do unless they go out and get a superstar and try to rebuild.
I don't think they could do that.
On the year, you guys are 1-20 when trailing after 3 quarters.
What?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
What
I did
makes
not know
it
that.
so different?
Just a few years ago, the Golden State Warriors had won their 4th NBA championship in 8 years. They had added a 3rd Splash Brother. Steph Curry was breaking records, and they even had some young talent people would expect to carry the Warriors dynasty into the late 2020s. Fast forward just 3 years later, and the team is floundering with no identity. They're on the cusp of wasting the last years of Steph Curry, and their future's looking very bleak. Where did it go wrong with the Warriors? Is this the end of their historic run? Or is there a way to give the Steph Curry-led Warriors one last chance at a championship? Before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications for the latest NBA news. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Ever since I've gotten this sponsorship, I've been trying to figure out a way to game the system so I can earn my subscribers money, and I finally did it this past week. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you all the messages I've been receiving over the past few days as a result of all the people making money with my picks. I have a model that has exponentially increased our hit rate, and if you don't believe me, just look at my DMs. I mean, people have been blowing up my DMs with all the money they've been making. We made thousands of dollars on Prize Picks this past week, and they're giving us one more free square for the Super Bowl. All Patrick Mahomes needs is one passing yard. I'm gonna post my play on my Instagram story at TheFlightMike or Snapchat FlightMike Snap once the game gets closer. But use my promo code microphone when you sign up for Prize Picks to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. And let's make some money off of this big game. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I want to analyze the cracks in the foundation of the Golden State Warriors, which were laid about 5 years ago. In 2023, Bob Myers, the franchise's general manager from 2012 to 2023, stepped down, and in his wake, the team hired Mike Dunleavy Jr. I want to make this distinction because I feel like both of these men have some responsibility for what the Warriors are currently facing. Before the Golden State Warriors' famous 2021 title run, the Warriors were in an interesting position under what we now know would be Bob Myers' final season as the Warriors general manager. After losing the NBA Finals in 2019, the Warriors would just win 15 games the next season after losing Steph Curry just 4 games into the season. This was a blessing in disguise as it not only allowed the Warriors to obtain the 2nd overall pick in that upcoming NBA draft, but it also allowed the Golden State Warriors to develop Jordan Poole, a late 1st round pick who soon would become a star in the Bay. But they only made space for him in the backcourt after Golden State shipped off D'Angelo Russell to Minnesota in exchange for Andrew Wiggins and a 2021 unprotected 1st round pick. The Warriors had somehow managed to completely rebuild in just 1 season. So let's recap what Bob Myers did from 2019 to 2021. He had drafted and developed Jordan Poole, traded away D'Angelo Russell at peak value, less than an offseason after trading for him, acquired what would be a 2nd overall pick and a 7th overall pick, and to top it all off, got Andrew Wiggins at the very bottom of his value. Now, in hindsight, we know one of these assets ended up being terrible, but at the time, Bob Myers was seen as the perfect example of how to run a front office. The Warriors would go on to win that fateful 4th title in 2022. Bob Myers had done the unthinkable, and he had managed to breathe life into a dying dynasty.
Yes, he's not necessarily incorrect. When they won the title 2 years ago, you know, we had kind of forgotten about them a little bit. Then they kind of went on their run and, you know, ended up with another title. And look, as long as you still have Steph Curry playing at that high of a level, they can overcome a whole lot of things.
But unfortunately, that's when things started to go downhill at a drastic pace. In early October, a video leaked that showed Draymond Green punching Jordan Poole in the face after Jordan Poole had gotten in veteran players' faces and pushed Draymond Green. The funny thing is, to this day, Draymond Green is still conflicted about whether or not he made the wrong choice punching Jordan Poole in the face.
Right, like I shouldn't have knocked him out like that. If anything, I should have hemmed him up. kind of was just a natural reaction. So
It felt like that whole season after the championship, the Warriors were clouded in this veil of uncertainty and animosity. Not just that, but Klay Thompson, Steph Curry's backcourt duo for the last decade, wasn't the same player he was prior to tearing his Achilles and ACL. But the main issue with that was his replacement, Jordan Poole, who had become an outsider to the team. If you think that's bad, it gets even worse. Remember the two key draft picks that Myers had gotten? The second overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft as a result of being so horrible, and the 7th overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft as a result of the trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Well, James Wiseman, the man that the Warriors took 2nd overall, was not the generational center that made him out to be prior to the draft. As for the 2021 NBA draft, the 7th overall pick, Jonathan Kuminga, well, he's not a bad player, but the Golden State Warriors have been making him out to be the future of the franchise, and currently they're not even sure about that. Kuminga has kind of stagnated in his development this past year. Coming out of the draft, the Warriors thought that he'd become the next coming of Giannis Antetokounmpo, but when you combine both of these draft classes, these are the players that the Golden State Warriors passed up on: LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, Franz Wagner, Alperen Sengun, and Trey Murphy. Now, I'm not saying that any other general manager or person could go 2 for 2 on these picks, because honestly drafting is difficult, but it needs to be said that the fact that there were players that could have helped the Warriors immediately definitely has set this franchise back. How much were they set back? Well, you're gonna have to wait a few more years to find that out. But after that tumultuous 2022-23 season, the Warriors had lost in the 2nd round and things had to change. This was when Bob Myers stepped down and new general manager Mike Dunleavy took over. Under his first offseason, the team drafted Brandon Podziemski in order to replace Jordan Poole, who they had traded away in order to acquire Chris Paul. Podziemski seemed solid as a rookie. Chris Paul was great off of the bench until he broke his hand, and the Warriors seemed like they improved, except for Klay Thompson. Thompson had his worst season in a decade and honestly was a huge factor as to why the Warriors missed the playoffs entirely last season. So it was no surprise when they agreed to a sign and trade to send Klay Thompson to Dallas in a move that helped open up minutes for younger players on the team. For the first time in over a decade, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson weren't on the same team, and the Warriors had made some extremely drastic decisions that would hopefully bring the Warriors back into finals contention. Now, I have to admit, things looked very promising for the Warriors to start off the season. The Warriors went 12-3 through mid-November, which on paper seemed like it proved that the Warriors had a sneakily successful offseason. By getting rid of Klay Thompson in a sign and trade, they added by subtraction, which allowed them to sign Buddy Hield as a replacement. They traded for Kyle Anderson and signed DeAnthony Melton in free agency, and even waived Chris Paul, which allowed Brandon Podziemski to get more minutes in his sophomore campaign. The Warriors didn't have sky-high expectations going into the season, but it's not like they were expected to be bad. They still had Steph Curry, who no matter his age was still the best shooter on the planet. They had Jonathan Kuminga, who is expected to take a huge leap in this upcoming season. Andrew Wiggins had proven that he's capable of being a good starting two-way wing, and Brandon Podziemski was expected to have a breakout-like season after finishing top 5 in Rookie of the Year voting.
I think like their expectation probably is, and this is like expectation organizationally, I would bet you it's still to get to like the conference finals and like win titles.
I said true playoff factor, so I think that's kind of what I meant with that.
It seemed like the Warriors' strategy of rebuilding the team through the draft and signing role players to surround Steph Curry was working. Well, it was working until it wasn't. Since November 23rd, the Golden State Warriors are just 10-20, and now they sit under 500 on the season. Buddy Hield, who was brought in to replace Klay Thompson, started off the season shooting 52% from 3, but obviously that wasn't sustainable. But we didn't think he was going to regress this terribly. After November 8th, Buddy Hield has shot just 33% from beyond the arc. As for Podziemski, he struggled so much that he literally wrote and posted an apology on Twitter for how bad he's been. Jonathan Kuminga hasn't regressed, sure, but he hasn't taken the next step that many have expected him to take, especially after asking for a max contract and practically throwing a tantrum and calling out his head coach last year, saying that he lost faith in Steve Kerr's ability to fully develop him as a player. What about Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry, the main core that the Warriors have built around? Well, Draymond Green is still a solid player who's helped anchor the team defensively. Andrew Wiggins has given you exactly what you would expect from him, nothing more and nothing less. And as for Steph Curry, although he's been inconsistent at times, it is pretty unfair to rely on a soon-to-be 37-year-old guard to give you 30 points every single night. Just look at Steph Curry's reaction finding out how bad the Warriors have been once they lose the lead entering the fourth quarter.
On the year, you guys are 1-20 when trailing after 3 quarters.
What?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious that Curry is just tired. Not physically, but tired of being expected to carry this team day in and day out. It's simply unrealistic, even if he is the best shooter on the planet. So how could the Warriors fix this team? And is it even possible? The Golden State Warriors revolutionized the game of basketball through their three-point shooting, rapid rotations on defense, and their small ball lineup. And they love to trot out 3 guard lineups, but I think them being interested in a guy like Nikola Vucevic is a sign that they're ready to adapt and move on from the style of play that has won them 4 championships. And I think this is a solid idea, as the Warriors haven't had a true center since they had Andrew Bogut on the roster. Although they play Kevon Looney at the 5, I think it's fair to say that he's an undersized 5. But this is more of a short-term fix than a long-term fix. Now, here's where things start to get complicated. There are 2 paths the Warriors could take in order to help rebuild this team and get back into a contending position. Here's the first path, the Kenny Smith path.
The rebuild is different. They should go young, through the draft, through trade, keep guys like Kuminga in his age. That group is where they need to be.
The belief here is that if the Golden State Warriors have enough stars in their prime, and in order to make this team better, they need to continue to draft players to provide depth and play off of Steph Curry. After all, the last time they traded a young talent like Jordan Poole, they ended up moving on from the player that they received in return. While Jordan Poole is having a career season, which we have a video coming out on that shortly, this strategy is certainly low risk, but it does little in guaranteeing that Steph Curry and the Warriors have a roster capable of making a deep playoff run. For all we know, by the time these players develop, Steph Curry could already be out of the league. Here's where path 2 comes into play, the Charles Barkley path.
You don't think the Golden State should get younger?
It doesn't matter what they do unless they go out and get a superstar and try to rebuild on the.
I don't think they could do that.
Well, that's their only chance because Steph is old.
Do you think this year they go for it? I mean, like a Jimmy Butler?
I think they should try.
This path is certainly more risky because you're essentially mortgaging your future now in order to build a last-ditch effort around Steph Curry. There's a chance it'll work and that the Warriors can make a run, and there's a chance it fails and they'll have to go through a longer rebuilding process. Now, usually I like to lay out a path that a franchise can take in order to accomplish a goal, but I'm honestly not sure what the Warriors should do here, so that's why I present 2 paths that they could possibly go down. If I had to make a personal choice, I would choose the second path, because although I like Kuminga and I like Podziemski, I also believe that you need to be very lucky in order to draft players like Steph Curry. And if you know you can win a championship around him, then you have to go all in on building around him. What do you think? Do you think the Golden State Warriors are officially done? Do you think there's a path forward for them to rebuild and retool this roster one more time for another championship run? Should they take a swing at players like Jimmy Butler or Zion Williamson potentially? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.